Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you. I have a desire to speak about my relationship with money and my journey with money. And by journey, I mean doing the underlying work of looking at my relationship with money, my beliefs with money, my energetic resonance with money, that has allowed me to expand into receiving larger amounts of money consistently into my life without sacrificing my values or feeling like I'm taking advantage of or going against the laws of nature or being out of disharmony with the earth. And all of these things, I'm burning some incense from this magic store called the Sword and Rose in San Francisco, in case you're wondering what I'm doing. And I'm having this conversation now because a lot of people have been reaching out to me, whether it's for the sovereignty course, which is open for enrollment now, when they're sharing about why they're coming into the container, or people who are interested in coaching work with me. A lot of what the conversation is around finding right relationship with receiving larger amounts of money for work that's deeply meaningful to us in a way that doesn't feel like we're compromising our integrity, what we believe in, or are in some way causing harm. And this is a big one, especially if you're on a spiritual path and you are aware that there's a lot of corruption in the world right now, and that there's a lot of people using money in corrupt ways in order to have power over, and that a lot of people are pursuing more and more amounts of money at the expense of connection with the earth. And it's actually at the result of direct, destruction of the earth. And there's so much manipulation and coercion that often what we don't realize is that if we're struggling in our relationship with money and being able to not just receive enough money, but more than enough money in ways that feel aligned with our soul and with our heart, there can be a lot of resistances and repellents that we're projecting out into the world on an energetic level because of our mixed relationship with how we feel about money. And I'm going to share my story. And if you have a desire to ask questions or share how this relates with you throughout this conversation, I welcome that. I'm going to share my own journey with money in a moment, but just want to share that one of the things that has been really interesting to me over the past 6 months, 9 months, almost a year since COVID started is, one of the big things that's been happening for a lot of people since COVID started is that they've been experiencing financial struggle, or that a lot of their resources or money has been depleted. And what I experienced in COVID is that as COVID occurred, I've actually experienced more financial abundance and prosperity consistently in my life and in my bank account than I ever did before COVID. And I've reflected on this and had this conversation with several people. And I'm not sharing this to brag or anything like that, because life is continually evolving and no one actually knows what will be tomorrow or the day after. But as I've reflected on this experience of feeling and being more financially resourced than I have before in my life amidst a global pandemic and things falling apart in society, reflects to me that I am in alignment with my own personal truth. That the fact that I can thrive when there's a global pandemic happening, which to me is the shattering of illusion, where we're seeing now all of the performances, all of the, I'm just going to perform or manipulate here, I'm just going to cut corners here, or I'm just going to not make this a super big deal because it's easier when I don't come into full integrity. And that has worked for our society, right? There's been so many cutting corners, and we've been able to just kind of brush it under the rug saying, oh, I'll deal with this later. And the thing is, it is later now. It's so blatantly apparent everywhere that we are out of integrity in our lives, and not just on a collective level, but on an individual level. And we simply can't pretend anymore. And what I'm grateful about, and part of what has kept me so grounded and so connected to myself and so centered throughout COVID, is that I feel so deeply connected and devoted to my purpose. I feel so in alignment with who I am and what I stand for in the world and what I'm offering in the world. And I feel how it is directly in alignment with being a part of the medicine and the antidote to what is happening in the world right now, that I'm in alignment, and I know that I'm providing value, and I know that what I'm providing is needed in the world right now, and I feel right and in right relationship with receiving money, with receiving support, with receiving resources for that offering. And I know and realize that the only way that I can continue to be of service in this world is if I allow for myself to receive and to be nourished by not just money, but resources and support in all forms. And it's my belief that especially those of us who consider ourselves light workers, or consider ourselves here as, a direct part of the medicine that is needed in the healing of this world right now, that it's essential that we deepen and expand our capacity to receive larger amounts of resources and money into our life, so that we can have more freedom and more support and more spaciousness, so that we're not working ourselves to the bone without the space to take care of ourselves and really come into giving from a place of fullness. So I want to share, and I'm curious how this is resonating for you. And please, I invite you to ask questions if they arise, or anything of that nature. So when I first started my money journey, it was about 5 or 6 years ago when I first started my business. When I started my coaching business, I had no money. I had invested all of it into a couple of different transformational courses, and just had this idea that the universe is just going to take care of me and I'll be fine. And the thing is, yes, the universe always does take care of you, and it's always a weaving of will and grace. We need to actively engage and be in the process of embodying and showing up and listening in our lives. The universe isn't just going to sweep in, and we need to co-create with the universe. And I had no money when I started my business, and I started my business sharing writings on intimacy and sexuality and relationship on social media, and inviting enrollment conversations with people. And what I quickly was aware of when I got into enrollment conversations with people is that right off the bat, I was clear that I didn't want to undercharge for my work. And clarifying now that I've gotten to a place in my work where I actually have different tiers of payment, that I've gotten to a place in my energetic expansion and embodiment where, for some of my higher end clients that are paying me $20,000 to work with me, for some of my higher end clients, they're paying $7,000. And then it creates a space where I can have a tiered system based upon where a person is at, and not need to charge as much, because I've created a space in my business where I'm clear that I only have a desire to work with several clients at a time, so that I can really go in deep, because we're working at an energetic level. And I only want to work with a few clients at a time, so that I have spaciousness to really go deep with clients. And simultaneously, what I've gotten clear on for myself is that I need a lot of space for myself. I need a lot of spaciousness in my life to be in my process, to be in my own alchemy, because much of what my life is about is alchemizing the collective experience through my body, discerning truth, discerning wisdom, and then bringing that into my work, into my creative writing, into my clients. So what I was charging then is not what I'm charging now, but at the time, it still felt like a lot of money. And I remember, I think I was doing maybe a group program that was 6 weeks of group coaching and six coaching sessions, hour-long coaching sessions for maybe $1,500. And at the time, that was a lot of money for me. And the story that I was holding was, I need that money. Like, I have my bills to pay. I was living month to month, and there was a lot of fear and contraction and scarcity and lack of trust in my ability to create for myself financially, which means what would happen is that I would show up into my enrollment calls from a place of, in a way, being led by my fear, being led by my need for money. And what would wind up happening is that they all carry energetic blueprints: fear, scarcity, need, the subtle energetics of manipulation or coercion. They all have energetic transmissions that even if the person you're speaking to doesn't consciously have an awareness of what is happening, they can feel that in their body. So what would wind up happening is that I was emitting a certain energy. Like, obviously I was, emitting enough richness that it drew people into wanting to have enrollment conversations with me. But simultaneously, there was this underlying fear of not having enough and the belief that, I need to push for this. I need to make money. And that story, that belief, and beneath that belief was a doubt in my worthiness, a doubt in my belief that I could be supported doing what I love and that it was right and aligned for me to be well financially supported in my work. There was just a doubt there. And it wound up, obviously I did get by. Obviously I'm still here. But I remember I would bring a lot of those fears into my enrollment calls with people, and it just didn't feel good. It didn't feel good to me. I'm sure on some level it didn't feel good to the potential clients that I was working with. And I really got clear that I wanted and needed to do this differently, because what I'm in service to is authentic, genuine, attuned connection, transparency, and clarity. And what I was noticing in myself is that my own fear and doubt in my ability to receive wealth was having me come into these connections with people from a place of, having an underlying agenda, which would impact my ability to show up authentic and connected with these people that I was, potentially going to be holding space for. So I got really clear that I had a desire to look at the underlying belief systems and energetics that were running the show in my relationship with money, and that not only I wanted, but I needed to figure it out, because it was essential to me that I learned how to be in relationship with money. Because right now, money is a form of power and energy and influence and freedom in this world. It's not always going to be that way. I believe that potentially in the not too distant future, money might not exist in the same way. But that being said, I exist in a system where that is a form of currency. And as long as I exist within this system, rather than feeling like a victim of money and just kind of like existing in this anger and rejection and resistance to it, which are all forms of allowing money to have power over me, I decided that if I'm going to, be in relationship with this matrix, I'm going to learn how to engage with it intentionally and on my terms, and find a relationship with money that feels expansive to me, and that I can actually receive more and more wealth from a feeling of being deeply in integrity with my value and with truth and with the earth. So when I reflect on some of the biggest fears that I unearth, the biggest stories that I unearth about my relationship with money and having more wealth, one of the fears I had was the fear of feeling like I was taking advantage of people. Another fear or belief that I had, or I would call it a crosswire, is the fear that if I am wealthy, it means that I'm out of connection with the earth. I've always been very, I've definitely identified as a hippie when I was younger. And I just care very much about my connection with the earth. And I remember early on in my money career, as I was unearthing the underlying belief systems, it was that I cannot both be in deep connection with the earth and simultaneously be open to receiving large amounts of wealth. And that was something that I needed to discover right relationship with, so that it didn't have to be an either or. That, I can either be deeply connected to the earth and in service to the healing of humanity, or I can have a lot of money. Because if I'm carrying that underlying belief system, it's always going to be an either or. And my desire was to create a yes and scenario, a yes and experience. And I really got to this place of awareness within myself that it might actually be that I'm meant to wield an immense amount of wealth and power and influence in this lifetime. And that's not actually a selfish thing or a materialistic thing, but it might actually be something that is necessary for my aligned expansion so that I can fully be of service in the way that I am meant to in this lifetime. And that allowing myself to embody my worth and my value and what I bring into this world is actually essential for my service. And that I can both be deeply humble to the power that's flowing through me and simultaneously allow myself to thrive financially and otherwise. So as I got deeper into this path of working with money and different teachers investing a lot of money, specifically into working with teachers around expanding my capacity to receive energetically, financially. And one of the approaches to that was investing huge amounts of, me at the time, huge amounts of wealth. I once invested into a $52,000 container with a coach, specifically to expand my capacity to receive out of basically necessity. That my monthly expenses expanded significantly, and that energetically I would simply need to expand to be able to sustain that jump. That was very uncomfortable. I do not recommend that level of a jump for everyone, especially if you're making almost nothing at the time. It was a very powerful lesson to me, and I have experienced some major jumps in my ability to attract into my life by the way I would describe it as like if I'm in a smaller pot, like if I'm a plant, and I've gotten pretty comfortable with the root system of that, my roots are touching the container. It's gotten familiar with that size container. So what I have learned how to do, and I've cultivated just a practice of, is, periodically plucking myself out of the container that feels like it's just the right fit, and then planting myself into a larger container that's bigger than my root system, because my root system will naturally have to expand and want to expand because there's more space. The key is really getting to know yourself and your energetic system and the way you expand and contract and how you relate with stress and a lot of sensation in the body, so that you're pleasurably expanding, just the right amount of discomfort, as opposed to jumping so hugely outside of your comfort zone that there winds up being an intense counter contraction. this is a lot of what we'll speak about in the sovereignty container, which is open for enrollment for women from now through October 10th. And I'll put a link in the comments below in case you're interested. And it's also in my Facebook bio. So I remember there was this one significant moment for me. And, you know, the deeper I got, like a big part of this is really clarifying and deepening into the truth of who you are and what you're actually here to be in service to. And the layers of basically allowing yourself to see who you truly are. Because I know for myself, what I have realized is that I've hidden from myself for a lot of my life. I've been afraid of facing the true potency and power of who I truly am. So I've revealed myself to myself in layers. And this means seeing the deeper layers of who I've been in previous lifetimes and what I incarnated at this time in this place to do. Because it can be confronting to truly know our purpose, especially if we have a big purpose, especially if our purpose involves allowing ourselves to be more visible in our power. You know, especially me as being a woman, speaking truth, being powerful. Women have been killed for being in our power, in our truth, and in our magic. Women are still killed for being in our truth and our power and our magic around the world. It's a deeply embedded collective blueprint that understandably we've all developed coping mechanisms for protecting ourselves from being hurt. And often we can associate greater levels of power and influence and money with the potential of getting hurt, getting rejected, getting attacked. And again, a lot of this is about working with the underlying fears and beliefs we have about what will happen if we fully embody our power and wield wealth and allow ourselves to be wildly financially successful. So I remember, you know, as I was really deepening, working with different teachers, really deepening into a big part of what I'm in service to in this lifetime is feminine truth, is the embodiment of the feminine, and permeating that into a culture that has in many ways suppressed and disowned the feminine aspect of creation as a necessary part of wholeness. And I got clarity that there was a period of time in my work, and I still do work with men in this way, but I was specifically really attracting in high power men who are, you know, lawyers, doctors, things of that nature, who have an immense amount of power and influence with their employees and in their sphere. And that my desire was to inject the feminine into those masculine structures through working with these men. And I really got clear for myself is that in order to allow myself to receive greater amounts of wealth in ways that feel aligned and true and in integrity, it required me to connect with my value and the truth that pours through me in such a way that I see the work that I offer as invaluable and just as worthy an investment as someone would pay thousands of dollars to have, you know, an architect build a gorgeous home. That seeing the value that I bring into a space through placing my attention upon a person, that my attention and the wisdom that pours through me is so deeply valuable, and in fact it is priceless, that I can name honestly any price point that I desire, and that it feels true and aligned in my body. And that's really ultimately what is going to have people say yes to you, regardless of the price point. It's about you being in integrity with the number that you're speaking into existence, and that you feel that truth within your body, that there is no part of you that doubts, there is no part of you that is trying to manipulate or control, that it's just the number that is true in your body, and whether or not this person says yes or no to you, you know that that was the aligned number to speak. And I am and was and am in service to that, because this world is needing to recognize the value and necessity of the feminine. And I got to this place of awareness in me that when I'm inviting people to invest that amount of money in our work together, it's in a way about reparations to the feminine, especially when men are investing that level. So I remember, and again, I said I work with different tiers, so I'm not charging all of my clients this amount, but some of them it's aligned to do so. And I remember I had been working with a male client for about 6 weeks virtually, and we were getting to a place where I knew the next level was for us to work in person. And I was clear that I was going to be offering him a 3-month in-person package for $18,000. And I remember doing my inner work beforehand to really find the truth and integrity of that amount within my body, finding such a clarity and depth of truth within my system that I could speak that in a way that was totally clear. I knew that that number was in service to this man's transformation. It was in service to my expansion. It was in alignment and connection with the laws of nature and the earth. And I felt free and connected in that. And at the time, I was also, slightly terrified, because I'd never charged or received that amount of money before. And before I did it, I didn't quite fully believe that I could have it, but I was also willing to take that risk. And I remember I was having this in-person conversation with this man. He didn't know how much the price was going to be. And after we had reached that place in our enrollment conversation where I was clear, now's the moment to name the investment and what the container looks like, I spoke it, that, that's this amount of time and it's an $18,000 investment. I was just there and present and open. And he wound up saying yes. He gave me his credit card. I ran the payment in full. He said thank you. We scheduled our first session. He walked out the door. And I remember at the time I was living in a studio that had this big wall of mirrors, like a ballet bar of mirrors. And I remember looking in the mirror and looking at myself, because there was this part of me that was thinking, the type of woman who can receive a full pay $18,000 payment for nothing other than just being herself is gonna look different than me, because I've never seen myself as that type of a woman before. I mean, that felt like something that was previously totally outside my range. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror afterwards and looking at myself and being like, it's just you. It's still me. It's the same Arielle that existed before she made that offer and before she received that payment. And it was just this huge aha for me that I don't actually have to be anything other than exactly who I am to receive wealth into my life. I don't have to compromise myself. I don't have to lie. I don't have to coerce. I don't have to sacrifice key values or what I'm in devotion to. All I actually need to do is get into right relationship with my why, with what I'm in service to, and to do the work of releasing the distortions of shame for my desire for money, guilt for my desire and intuition to charge larger amounts of money for my work, releasing all those distortions of fear, guilt, and shame, which those conditionings, those distortions apply in the same way to money as they do to sex and intimacy and pleasure. It's all related. And it's been an amazing journey. That moment changed my life. And there was another moment that happened a couple of years ago when I moved into this new home that I'm in now. At the time, I was living in that same studio apartment, and I was paying, a little over $1,000 a month for rent. And I had just gotten back from Hawaii, and I was receiving messages and guidance from Spirit that it was going to be time for me to move soon. And I just opened myself up and I said, okay, show me, where do you want me to be? And not too long after I opened that invitation for the universe to show me where it wanted me to be, there was a post that popped up from a new sister acquaintance of mine who had actually met while I was on Maui at a handpan gathering, at Abria Joseph's handpan gathering. And she posted, I found my queendom. It's this gorgeous mansion up in the Berkeley Hills, and I'm looking for some women to move in with me. And at the time, she had told me that the space that was available was this 2-bedroom apartment in the lower unit that was, $2,500. And at the time, I wouldn't have even considered that amount, because that was more than double the amount that I was paying. And I was even considering potentially like finding a housemate to live there with me, because it wasn't even something I could have considered, just paying that much per month. And then I remember that I came to see the place, and I walked in the door. And as soon as I walked in, money aside, I was just clear in my body that this is my space, that this is my temple. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm clear with every fiber of my being that I'm meant to be here. So I guess I'm going to expand into allowing myself to have it. So I said yes. I hired a coach who was working with, different energetics around expansion and abundance, because I knew I was going to need some support going into this, because just as there was an immense amount of desire for this place, there was also a lot of fear. And just wanting to clarify, I don't know if the fear ever goes away. I still experience fear daily, because I'm constantly making choices and taking risks that are expanding me outside of what I have previously experienced and what has previously felt comfortable. It's like I'm walking on an invisible bridge where each step, I'm just trusting that the next step is going to be there. And it's constantly expanding me out beyond what I've previously known. And I just knew that I was going to need some support, because I had just taken a big step in my expansion. I had just put myself in a significantly bigger container that was going to require me to grow. And expansion isn't comfortable. Expansion can feel deeply uncomfortable. It can feel like death. It can feel like everything's falling apart. And sometimes it is. And sometimes it's you transforming into a new being and releasing old belief systems and old ways of being and old energies that are no longer aligned with this new container that you've stepped into. And it can be really helpful to have a supportive container being held by people that you trust and who you see embodying truth and expansion and relating with reality in a way that feels aligned and in integrity to you and with you. And it was super uncomfortable. It really was. And again, I don't necessarily recommend, we all have to find our own methods of aligned expansion. And, where I've gotten myself today in my life is, on a material level, I can say that I have more than enough. I'm no longer living month to month. I have more than enough. There is a comfort in my financial experience that is not what I experienced in the beginning of my business adventure. There's a stability. There's a consistency in people finding me for my work. That's one thing that I've always found, and now even more so, is that I don't seek out clients. I don't seek out people. People find me. And I've gotten to a place in my work where my nervous system, my energetic emotional system has found a new comfort with a higher level of havingness. It's no longer vibrating at the I need to stay at the bare minimum because that's where I feel safe and comfortable. And this is a lot of what the energetic elements of working with money is. We might think that on a conscious level, we hate not having enough money. But on some level, there's a part of us that can become really attached to the comfort and familiarity of the struggle. And again, that's a lot of what we'll be working with within the container of sovereignty, which is an 8-week initiatory container for women embodying truth and greater levels of influence and power in their lives, and their sex, and their intimate relationships, and their career, and their purpose. Ultimately, what I've learned is that the more that I expand, the more that I choose to craft a reality, co-create with the universe in a way that is constantly expanding my idea of who I am and what I am capable of. Ultimately, it requires me to be willing to expand my willingness to not just be with discomfort, but to artfully work with the energy and sensation of discomfort in my body. And in the moments where I feel uncomfortable, to realize that that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm unsafe. And that when I do feel unsafe, or when I do feel uncomfortable, to learn how to work with my energy and my emotions and my heart in a way that is healing and compassionate and supportive to me. And actually allows me to stay open and receptive as opposed to caving in on myself. And to remind myself that the conditioning, the current conditioning in this culture doesn't want us to feel safe. The current conditioning in this culture on an energetic level doesn't want us to feel powerful, doesn't want us to feel like we have the capacity to transform our experience just through coming into deeper, more intimate relationship with ourselves. The current conditioning doesn't want us to feel that our heart and our truth and integrity has power. So in those moments where I start to feel shame or judgment or guilt or self-doubt, it's an invitation for me to remind myself that those feelings aren't me. They're a collective conditioning that exists outside of me that is wanting for me to cave in on myself. And that if I believe in truth, and I believe in love, and I believe in connection, and I believe in equality, and I believe that there is something much greater available to all of us than what we currently see in the media, that it is my responsibility to be kind and compassionate with myself, so that I can empower myself to move through the fears that have previously destabilized me, and that I don't have to do it alone. That I'm not actually meant to do it alone. So I hope that these words have served you in some way. I'd be curious to hear what lands, what feels resonant. For those of you who are female or identify as someone who is assigned female at birth, Sovereignty, which is an 8-week container for women, is open for enrollment through Saturday evening, October 10th. I'm going to include a link to Sovereignty in the comments below so you can get a feel for who the container is for, who the course is for, what the different elements of it will be, what we'll be cultivating within this container, and got a feel for the different guest teachers that will be coming in. And if it's aligned, it would be a pleasure to share that space with you. If you have any questions, you're welcome to private message me or email support@ariellebrown.com. Thank you for your presence. It's a pleasure to be here with you.